Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's been a few days since I touched the building a SaaS video series and our project, which is Fancy Bar. But I'm going to jump back into it. It's been 2 days that I haven't done anything, but I think it's okay. I try not to beat myself up whenever I can't dedicate something that's kind of just like a fun side project. But nonetheless, you got to keep on moving forward. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to jump back into it. And so this is the software as a service that we are building called Fancy Bar. And we are building this with the Wave software as a service starter kit that comes with a bunch of features out of the box to help you build your own software as a service. And this whole series is kind of also teaching how to use it and then how we're going to basically build a SaaS together in only a half an hour a day. So the service, if you're following this series, you already know is a little fancy bar that you can add to the top of your website. We have a few different bars that the user can add to their website. So here's like an example 2. Example 4 was the one that we just had on there. Example 5, which is a product hunt bar. And then 6, which is this a little bar down here. So I think maybe for this video, I was thinking about a few things to do, or for this half-hour segment, I was thinking maybe we could add some animations. So as you go to visit the specific bar, then you can click on it and it will show that bar. I also don't want to have to click each one individually, so it would be kind of nice if I just maybe even had like screenshots of each of the fancy bars on this page. I could click on it and then it would trigger off that bar to drop down, and this way I could easily go back and forth between all the bars, and I know kind of the designs that I already have, and then I know maybe more that I need to build out. So how about we just probably create an example of how we want to show the bar. So right now, if I go to bar 001, I think this is actually just loading a template. And in the previous video, I said that I want this to be loaded from an iframe. So I think what I'll do is I'll probably create some JavaScript that will then inject this into a page. So maybe if I go back here and I want to click on the 001, maybe that's going to fire off some JavaScript that is then going to show that specific bar. So let's go ahead and go into the code. And I'm just going to go to the resources, views, and let's see where this was at. So this is inside of themes, tall stack. And I think that was just inside of I think we had, bars.blade.php. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to write some JavaScript directly in this file, and then later on I can move that into a JavaScript file that I can then run through like npm and make sure that it's minimized and everything. But to just start off, I usually like to just open up the script tag and just start writing some JavaScript. So I'm going to say that maybe if we click on this, so I'll add an onClick event equals, I'm going to say open bar, and I'm actually going to make this the reference for that specific bar number. And I'm not 100% sure where I'm going with this, but I'm trying to kind of visualize it as I go along. So I'll just say window.function equals open bar. That's kind of cool. It's an open bar. We take in the number, and then we load the bar into the page. So what I could do is, just as an example, maybe I create a container equals fancy bar dash container. I can even just name this ID equals fancy bar. And so whenever we click on this bar, maybe I want it to run this function, and then maybe I want to inject something directly into the fancy bar. Maybe I want to add the iframe and then put that specific bar inside of that iframe. So I'm going to say document.get element by ID fancy bar, and I'm going to store this in a variable called, I'll just say container. So container dot inner HTML, we want that to equal an iframe with source equals, and I think I'm just going to hard code something in there just so we can give it a try. So this would be at fancybar.test/bar/001. So I could just hard code that URL in like this. And I probably want to actually add the whole URL. So I don't exactly know what the height of this one is. I mean, I could actually go here and see exactly what the height is, but eventually we're going to have to make this dynamic. So based on the height of the bar, we're then going to need to set the height of that iframe. But right now we're just testing things out. So I'm going to check out the height, which is 2 rem. And I'm still not 100% clear on the conversion rate. In my head, I can visualize pixels a lot easier than I can rem, but I'm trying to get better at it. I know a lot of people use the rem measurement, and I hear that it's better for responsive web design, but I still haven't wrapped my head around how to visualize rem as opposed to pixel. But let's go ahead and just copy this, and I'm just going to set style equals height. And again, we're kind of just testing this out, so I am going to just hard code that. And since we're testing this out, I'm going to make this a div instead of the a tag. And let's go ahead and just see this. But first I actually want to make each of these width 100%. And display block, just that way they're each on their own line. Am I missing something there? Let's see. Go back here and reload. So now if I click on this, let's go ahead and open up the console, and we're getting unexpected token. So let's just go backwards from this. Window.function equals open bar, and that is the one that we clicked right there. Open bar equals function. You can tell my JavaScript isn't as good as a lot of my other programming skills because it takes me a little bit harder to debug stuff. So we click on that, and then sure enough we get the iframe. But let's see why that's showing up as broken. So we have the iframe here, fancybar.test/001, and yeah, I'm not serving it up through HTTPS, I'm serving that up just through HTTP. So let's change that, and I know that I also want the width to be 100%. I want border of 0 pixels, and I think I actually have to set as an attribute, I think it's border equals none. It might even be frame border. I don't remember. But we'll go ahead and just add both of them in there, and we'll give this a try again. So I click on that, and it adds the iframe, and it adds the bar to the page here. So I also want to make sure that the body has a margin and padding of 0px. And usually this is common with most sites will have that style where the body and the HTML is just reset to have 0 margin and 0 padding. So I'll add this style here at the top. And we'll say HTML body margin 0 pixels, padding 0 pixels. Okay, so let's try this again. We click on that, and then now we get our bar right here. And again, if we click on 0.2, it's going to do the same thing because we actually haven't, we're just loading that we're loading that statically. So let's change this to open the specific bar. So here's the num. I think I can actually just replace that right there. And now this is going to work for a few of them, but you'll see as we get to the other bars, it's not actually going to work because they're not going to be the same height. So we click on 001, 002, 003, and you can see even this one is a little bit off. And then now you can see it's getting cut off. 5 is cut off, and 6 we're not going to see at all because that's actually down at the bottom right. So we actually need to probably specify some attributes for each of these bars. So we can say bar open 001. Now it would open the top. So this could change later on, and I'm trying to think of the best way to implement these different styles of bars. I could actually, maybe I get the content and then we could calculate that height, but I don't really want that to be, I really don't want that to take too long. So maybe I could store this in a config, and I can just specify the height, And probably down the road, whenever we allow them to modify these, we may even save a lot of these attributes in the database. This way we can just fetch some data from the database, display the bar, and then we can even cache those results. So every single time it gets that bar, it doesn't have to call the database. So let's go ahead and just say that we know this was height of 2 rem. So maybe for each bar I could have specific styles. I'm trying to think of where I would store that at. So I know that we did have our config. We had our bars right here. So if I wanted to, I guess I could loop through. Yeah, I could loop through each bar, and then I could basically get the styles that I want to pass to that iframe. Let's go ahead and just give this a shot. So we're going to copy these current styles, and this is the style that we want for, we know for sure, for bar 001. So I'm going to say style and store that in there. So now to do this, we would actually pass in the bar, and this is actually getting all of the bar keys. So we need to get each of the bar styles. So let me go back to the bar controller. And I know that we got array keys here. And somebody actually commented in the video a better way to do this, which makes a little bit more sense. So I could actually just get all the bars here. I pass it in there. And then inside of here, I say bars as, I can say $key bar. So this is actually going to be the key. Let's just make sure that this is working. Go back here, reload. We click, yeah. And now that's working. So now we have all of those configs that we need. So we can call bar name, bar file, type, and style. So we have the key here. Let's go ahead and also pass in the specific styles. So that's going to be bar and styles. Let's see if I'm doing that right. On click, we add this, we add the bar, the styles. I'll probably get an error if that's not correct. So let me just see. Yeah, undefined index styles. Oh, that's right. We probably have to add style to each one. I'll say style. So we're going to say if it's not set, we're just going to set that to an empty string. So if we reload that, now 001 should work, and we're actually not passing the dynamic styles. So let's go ahead and get that from, we have number, and then we also have the style. So for the style of the iframe, we're going to say style right there. So now we should be able to have styles for each of these different bars. So now if I reload this and we click on it, it now shows that one. And say 002. I don't think we had any styles, so that's why it's showing, just showing the default width and height of that iframe. So let's go through each one and we'll see 002. I think the 002 is going to be the same. So we have 002. Let's see 003. I think this one might be a little bit larger. So what was the H on this? H9, and that is going to be 2.25 rem. Okay, so I want to store that there. And 004, let's see what that one is going to be. That's H-10, let's see, 2.5 rem. So they're all looking very similar. The last one is going to be quite a bit different. So 2.5 and 005 is going to be, I think this one is even taller. H11, 2.75, I believe. Yep. So it looks like the Tailwind styles, the height, every one that you increment goes up by 0.25 rem. That's what it looks like it's doing. 2.75 rem. And now our last one. So we'll say this one. And we have a specific width and height here. So I could actually take the pixel value of this. So I could say 324 by 128, or I could specify the width and height. Yeah, let's go ahead and take the pixel value of this because I can see that as I highlight over is 384 by 128. So I'll say width of 384 and height of 128 pixels. So we don't need width of 100%, but we do need this to be positioned, and we'll say we'll want position fixed. In fact, we'll probably want fixed for each one of these. Yeah, so I think we actually want to have position fixed, and it's going to be at the top of 0 px and left of 0. So let's go ahead and add that to all of these. So all the floating ones. And this is probably something also that we'll need to do. Since I know that these floating ones are going to have the same position, this may be something that I want to set for any bar that has this type. But for now, we're just going to hard code it, and then we can get around to that later. Okay. Let's go with that. And we know this last one is going to be at bottom 0 and right 0. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. So if I go back to this page and I click on 001, we're going to see that bar. And since we are fixed, we're not going to actually see this right here. So maybe I want to add a little bit of, say div style equals margin top. I'll say 30 px. So now we click on that one, it shows this one. We click on 2. Let's go to 3. Yeah, now you can see that it actually did take those specific height. So 4, that's a little bit larger. 5, that shows up. And let's give 6 a try. Hey, what do you know? Although it does look like it's cut off. So I think we did want that to be a little bit larger because we had this margin right and margin bottom. So let's see what those styles were. So we had max W 6XL. Okay, we had max W-SM. So let's see what that is. So that's 24 rem. We have a margin bottom of 4, which is 1 rem. So it looks like our height or our width, let me see, we have a margin right of 1 rem. Yeah, so it looks like our width, should be 24 plus 1, so it'd be 25 rem. So let's add that style here. Width is 25 rem. Let's take a look at that height. So we did have H of 32, which was 8 rem, plus we have the one at the bottom, so that would be 9. And we could even pad this a little bit too if we wanted to. Like I could say 10 rem, and that would probably be okay. But let's see what we're dealing with here. So let's click on 06. Yeah, and now that shows up right there. That is pretty cool. So we can already click on each of these bars and get a preview of what each one is going to look like on this specific page. And like I said, we probably also want to animate each of these because we don't want it to just show up on the page. And the animation will be something that we'll want the users to be able to configure once they add the bar to their website. So it looks like we're doing good on time. We've got about 8 more minutes left. So I'm trying to think if I want to tackle the animation, and I guess I could try and, do that right now. Let me see. We have bar controller, so bars, And I'm trying to think of this animation. So the animation is actually needing to happen. Actually, it doesn't need to happen on the iframe. So I'm thinking maybe it could happen like on page load. So if I were to show bar 001, maybe I could have that slide down. But now actually, as I think about it, it probably would be better to have the animation on the iframe itself. This way, if the user doesn't want that to show up for a certain amount of time, then we could wait until we show that iframe. And I'm usually used to doing tailwind animations, but I could always use an animation library, or I could even just write my own CSS animations. So one that is very common is the slide down, especially for one that's at the top. So let's go ahead and just try and add an animation real quick. So I know if I go to Tailwind CSS, the ones that I will usually use is I'll use transition. So I'll typically use this transition property, and I'm trying to think if I could even use Tailwind for some of this. Probably not, since it's going to happen on the user's page. I'm thinking that I may actually need to inject these styles directly into the page, and then anything that happens in the iframe is just going to be isolated. So what I could do is I could even look for a JavaScript animation library. Let's see. Examples. Yeah, I think this is going to be a little bit more complicated. Yeah, we don't need we don't need that cool of animation. So it would be cool to eventually have something like that, but I think for now we don't really need that. I think that we probably just need some simple transitions. And let's go ahead and do that. So probably for the first bar, I know that I want to have a negative translate y of the current height. So I'm just going to go ahead and just add some styles in, and we can make those styles dynamic for the specific bar. But I'm just going to say animate fancy bar down. And I think what I will do is I'll add, oh man, this is going to really hurt. My CSS skills have gone down since I've learned Tailwind, and that's only because I've kind of learned how to use the calculator and don't remember all of the math behind it. So I'm probably going to have to look up how to do these transitions. So I'll say transition all. Let's go ahead and just say transition property, and I want this to be transform. Transform. Yeah, and let's just go ahead and use these default timing function and duration. And then I also want a translate y. So we'll say that translate. Yeah. So transform, translate y. I think that's going to be a negative 100%, or we could even just try negative, and what was the height that we had for bar 1 was height of 2 rem. So I could say negative 2 rem. Let's see if I were to add this class to our iframe and what we're getting here. So let's go here, let's click on 1, and now that's good because we're not seeing it. That is actually translated up. Click on this. Yeah, so the height, actually translate y is negative 2 rem. So we want that to actually animate then to 0 rem, and you can see that it would slide down right there. So we want maybe after a certain time to add a maybe slide down, animate fancy bar down. And I don't know if I want this class to actually, I'll probably want to come up with a really good naming convention because all of these animations are going to be based on these specific classes. So let's say that we want fancy bar, I'll say animate down. So I'm going to create another one called fancy bar-animate. And this is going to include these classes right here. And then whenever I actually want that to animate down, I guess what we could do is, we know that we want translate y to be 0 here. And we're going to need to add, this translate y is going to be different for every single case. And it's going to be weird if it's actually down at the bottom right and then you animate down. So let's go ahead and just try, say, fancy bar animate down. Yeah, so maybe this one is -2 rem. And then once you apply the fancy bar-animate, maybe we'll say show. So the reason why we want to keep these unique and add the fancy bar before it is because we're actually going to be, applying these styles directly on the person's document. And those are going to be the only styles because that's what is going to stylize the iframe. And then inside the iframe is all going to be isolated. So this could change later, but I'm just going to see what this looks like if I were to change show to 0 rem. So the first thing that I want to do is maybe I also want to pass in a delay. So by default, this could just be 0. And we have the container, inner HTML. We have the animate. So it should have this class right here. So we have fancy bar animate. And then we're going to have the animate down. So then what I could do is I could say after this specific duration, so I could set a timeout. And this timeout is going to fire based on the delay. So if we pass it, would be like 3000, that would be 3 seconds. So for now, we're just going to set that to 0. And we're going to say that the container, we want to get the iframe. So looks like we're running short on time, but I want to make sure that we get this just so we can have a little sample of what it's going to look like with the animation. So the container dot, I think that's child nodes. I'm not sure. I'll have to Google that. So we'll say JavaScript get child node ID. Child nodes, child element. So let me see. Element by ID, child node sub I. I mean, I know that the only node that it's going to have is the iframe, so I guess I could technically just get the very first child node. So I could say JavaScript get first child. Yeah, so I guess we just get dot first child. So container dot first child dot class list dot add, and I want to add the fancy bar animate down show. So let's go ahead and give this a look. So we click on this, click on 0, 1, and I don't think that animation actually happened. I'm wondering if it's because this delay. Let's take a look. So let's set the delay for 1 second. That wasn't what we wanted. So that's because it started off. Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. So we had that set at 2 rem. We need that to be -2. Let's click that. Now we click. And so that after 1 second, then that does show up. So even if we were to set this to 0 and we reload, we now click on this, and it doesn't have, I think it's because we need to at least set it to 1. So this would pretty much be the equivalent to 0 because we need to wait for the iframe to be added, and then we wait that split second. I think it's the next JavaScript loop that is then going to have the animation down. Doesn't look like even that showed it. Let's say, yeah, it doesn't look like it's actually happening. What if we set it to 100? We should see that animation just slightly. And I'm thinking that's because 150 milliseconds. Let's go ahead and say that we want the duration of the animation to be 1 second. Okay, so yeah, now that comes down a little bit more. And this could be something that we configure as well, is the transition duration. So let's try setting this back to 0. And let's see if that, yeah, so that still slowly animates. So that's kind of nice. And what we could do is we could set the delay so the user could say, I don't want the bar to show up until maybe, I don't know, 30 seconds after the user actually lands on the web page. So let's go ahead and try 3 seconds. So if we reload and say that the bar automatically gets loaded on that user's page load, and then they wait 1, 2, 3, and then the bar shows eventually. So that's pretty cool. I think we made some pretty good progress. We were able to get each of the bars to show up as we click on the page. We kind of implemented how the embed is going to work. So we're going to offer the user a JavaScript embed that they add to their website that then is going to have this kind of open bar function. And then the open bar function is going to inject a fancy bar element that then is going to add the inner HTML of this iframe, which is then going to load their specific bar. So I think that's pretty good so far. We also added a little bit of animation. We'll want to clean this up. We'll want to add a bunch more bars down the road. And then what's kind of cool is we'll be able to have the user go through this funnel where they enter in their domain. And then we could even show their domain in an iframe, or we could take a snapshot of their domain, and then we could show the different bars animate down or animate from the top. And yeah, it's just going to be really cool. And I think it's going to be a good way to show people how to use the fancy bar and what it will look like on their website, where they're then also going to offer a free bar so they can add it completely free. It's just going to have a fancy bar branding maybe up here on the top left. And yeah, I think it's going to be pretty cool. I will then going to maybe add some split testing functionality and a lot of other cool stuff. So thanks for hanging out with me as we build a software as a service in 30 minutes each day. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.